and welcome to the podcast, Living Uncertain. This podcast is dedicated to obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and the primary treatment, exposure response prevention, ERP. OCD comes in many forms, such as contamination, perfectionism, checking, harm, superstitious, religious or moral, sexual orientation, and/or relationship. ERP is the gold standard to treating OCD, and it focuses on deliberately confronting fears, the exposure, while refraining from compulsive rituals, the response prevention. With repeated exposures and without engaging in compulsions, we learn to tolerate anxiety and break the cycle of intrusive thoughts. We are a married couple that have faced both the challenges of OCD and the incredible healing that ERP can provide to your marriage, family, and your home. As a person who lives with OCD, I am much more than this diagnosis. We all can be. Hi, y'all. It's Stacey, and along with my husband, Marc, we want to thank you for living uncertain with us. Welcome to episode 22. We're very excited to still be here with you all, and as you all know by now, this is the podcast that talks all things OCD and ERP related, and tonight we're going to be talking about a lot of different pieces and bits that Marc and I have been thinking about over these last few days that really does fit into the framework of what we like to talk about here on this podcast.
The hidden parts of OCD, kind of.
Yes, definitely the hidden parts of OCD, or the things that you experience as someone who has OCD that you didn't realize was OCD, both mental and physical and kind of everything in between.
So you want to start it off with?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we really want to do on this episode is to really thank everyone who's out there listening to us. We're so humbled. We're so thankful to have this community. It's so invigorating to us to be a part of the community so that we can put OCD on the map, so to speak, in terms of giving it a voice and sharing what it is and what it isn't, and really being able to try to help those out there who have it and those who have loved ones who have OCD. And it's just such a really beautiful thing to see this community really together spreading the word of what OCD means to them and what they want the world to know about OCD. And I mean, in the podcast world, on social media, wherever you look, there are people out there who are trying to
be champions.
Yeah, be champions of OCD, be educators of OCD, and really let people know what an incredible struggle it really can be for those of us who really do have symptoms of it.
You know, and we have people, when we first started this, we didn't know where it would go or how far it would reach. And now we're realizing that this is reaching, all around the world, which is exciting for us. And we appreciate, if you live in another country, that you're listening and supporting our podcast. And hopefully some of this stuff resonates with you that we've been talking about.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
If you do live in another country, we'd be more than happy to have you on the show too as well. You don't just have to live in the United States. And, culturally, sometimes there's probably a negative connotation for, if you have OCD, it might not be something you talk about as a family, or, might not be supported for treatment or whatever, but you suffer with OCD. But just know that there's a community out there that does support you if you do have that. If you are suffering from OCD. And
absolutely. There's a very big community out there, and we're so blessed to be a part of that now, and excited to be sharing our journey and what OCD has done to our family, but also what ERP has meant to our family, and really what we have been able to accomplish in this last couple of years.
Because I know our life is vastly different now that we've been through a big chunk of ERP.
Yes.
and it's not something that you just give up and stop doing. We have to keep training that mental muscle that you have and
Mm-hmm.
keeping it strong. And that's where you and I think works well, where we do it together.
Absolutely. Yes.
You're honest with me, and
Mm-hmm.
I look for different ways that it could be, or I don't reassure you. If you're looking for reassurance and
Yeah.
whatever, I try to stay strong to that. So, and that I think that's helped us with our relationship, with our
Mm-hmm.
kids, with family members, with just people we even interact on the streets.
Yeah.
You walk away with more confidence than questions.
Yes, definitely. My surge of confidence is something I recognize pretty much on a daily basis now. And the opportunity to live uncertain, as we like to say. And I think that's such a huge concept for me because it's not been something I've ever been able to do before. And I've never been able to kind of live without fear or live without panic. And although those things are still a part of my life, they don't define me anymore, and they don't control every move and every decision that I make any longer. And I think throughout the episodes of this podcast, we've talked a lot about what that has meant and what that looks like for our family now. And even now that I know, that I'm more aware, that I have done the work or a lot of the work, I'm still discovering things that perhaps I do that I didn't realize were OCD, or that I have done in the past, or that have happened in the past that I didn't realize were necessarily linked to my OCD. And of course, as a member of this OCD community, but also as someone who's always seeking information and answers and support, etc., both Mark and I have been looking at a lot of different things. We've been listening to other podcasts. We've been, going down different paths of social media and other accounts that people have on social media that are also getting the message across about OCD. And it is incredibly fascinating and so interesting to hear what they have to say and to listen to what their struggles might be and how that it makes me feel not so alone. And that's what we're hoping to achieve with this podcast, is to help some of our listeners out there not feel so alone. And it means that we all have to kind of come together as a community. One of the things that I did know from fairly early on after I got my diagnosis is how long people generally have wait between their symptoms starting and receiving treatment or receiving therapy. And I know for a fact that I fit in that category. And I'm definitely one of those that had the symptomology from many, many years prior. In fact, my diagnosis
almost
didn't come through until 30 years, actually, because I was in my 40s when I was diagnosed. I was in my teens when I can first remember some of those symptomologies starting to come through, some of that needing things to be just right or getting reassurance, those kinds of pieces of what my OCD is. I knew those were happening to me as early as about 15. So it really did take quite some time for me to be identified as having OCD, and then going back and realizing all of those things that I would do that were actually a part of OCD. And I didn't realize it at the time.
I think too, one of the things that's more unique about our podcast too, a lot of the other people out there that have podcasts are mental health professionals too.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And they do share their, other people's stories and so on and so forth. But we're coming from it from a couple's perspective without, you've got a master's degree, I've got a master's degree, but they're not in mental health.
Right.
But we both work with people, adjacent to that
we do
piece, but it's not our main career. So we bring a different lens to this piece of OCD.
Absolutely. Yes, we do. And we bring the lens of a spouse's perspective too, which I think is so invaluable to the help that someone with OCD needs in their corner in order to make the change and to heal.
And you've been willing to make those changes too. There are people out there with OCD that don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, I finally got to the place where I recognized I didn't want to let this continue to define me or to rule my life. And so I made the commitment to myself. I made the commitment to you, to our therapist, our family, that I was going to do it, regardless of how uncomfortable I might feel with it or how challenging it was. And it is still challenging. I still have moments where I want to give up or I don't want to do it if it's a particular exposure and I just am fighting the urge. I want to have that compulsion make me feel better, knowing that on the other side of it, it's really only going to make me feel worse, and it's only going to perpetuate the anxiety, the panic, the intrusive thoughts, et cetera, that have to do with OCD.
And I think now you're working more on the micro OCD pieces.
Yes, because I feel like we've talked about before, I've really tackled the big pieces and then kind of went through a hierarchy from there. And so now I find myself just needing to go back a little bit and doing some exposures to even some of the bigger pieces, just to make sure that I'm keeping it in check. And I'm reminding myself why I'm doing this. And I'm reminding myself how I feel being on the other side of such intense OCD symptomology. But it's interesting to me when I hear other people speak or I see things that they've written or whatnot that's more in line to what they experience. And it's so nice that I don't have to feel so alone anymore. And so one of the big pieces for me, and we've talked about this on other previous episodes too, is driving. Driving was something that I never thought that I would really be able to do, because as far as I can remember, I've had intense anxiety and intrusive thoughts around being behind the wheel. And there are certain aspects of it that come up, and I never realized that other people with OCD were perhaps dealing with the same thing. And I saw it written somewhere that, these things could occur if you have OCD when other people might not think a thing about it. And when you stop and you pause and you think about that for a moment, it really is so interesting to dive into, because I know for me and for Mark that things that I think are a very big deal, or things that I think are a huge obstacle in my way, are things that I know you, babe, would not give
a second thought
to.
About it.
And the idea that you don't give that extra thought to it, or that doesn't affect you, it's such a foreign concept to me, because obviously, as we know, we're so wired differently when we have OCD. But for example, specific to my driving, I had two things, but there was more, but two in particular that made me so uncomfortable that I didn't want to be behind the wheel, which was if a police car was driving behind me for any amount of time, for any reason, I would just spiral into such a panic, and I would start checking. I would start checking in my rearview mirror, to the point where I was actually looking behind me more than I was looking forward, which obviously becomes a safety hazard as well when you're on the road. And that would make me feel nervous as well. And I would have to keep checking.
And you might be going the speed limit.
Oh, yes. No, I'm not breaking any traffic laws. I'm doing what I need to be doing very safely, very carefully. But even so, just having that police car behind me. Now, I know some other people might be, oh, yeah, they take note of it, but they're not spiraling. They're not looping into a panic attack about it, or into intrusive thoughts about it that lead to the need for a compulsion. In my case, physically checking and looking to see if they're still behind me, and where are they, and how close are they, or how far away are they. And I would be doing that too ad nauseum until I felt like it was just right.
Or they would
turn off, and then it was like, oh, okay, well, now they're not behind me anymore. But the other one,
well, and I will piggyback on that, like myself. Yeah, when a police officer pulls up behind me too, I'm always wondering, like, well, was I speeding? And because sometimes I am, and I just hope I'm not getting a speeding ticket. But you're a really good driver, and you don't, break the traffic laws and stuff.
Right.
And so I can see where that's really difficult, where myself is like, okay, am I getting pulled over because I was going 5 or 10 miles an hour over the speed limit?
Right. But then you kind of acknowledge or clock the idea that he's behind you or she's behind you, and then you keep on driving.
Yeah. And it
where for me, it became...
And the fear of it dissipates pretty quickly.
Sure.
Because the lights don't turn on.
Yeah. And for me, that fear doesn't dissipate. It just gets stronger and stronger. And I'm literally checking constantly. And the other piece that I have done in the past would be that if I passed someone on the sidewalk, whether they were walking, whether they were riding a bike or a scooter or something, if I passed them and they were on the sidewalk and I was on the road, I would have to check my mirrors again until I couldn't see them anymore, or until it felt just right for me. So I was constantly clocking behind me again to make sure that I hadn't hit them or that they were still alive, because maybe they're dead now. I mean, there's a lot of things that would go through my mind, and it would also impact, again, my nervousness for just driving, because now I'm looking behind me instead of forward. And I can just think about it early on when I was first trying to drive, learning how to drive in my teens, my early 20s. And then there was a time frame in my life, which Mark is very well versed into, that I essentially stopped driving for many, many years. And I am now just back behind the wheel again and feeling more confident and more comfortable than I ever have. But I really have to keep myself accountable, checking when I'm in the car, because Mark's not always there. And even though I'm driving our daughter Avery around a lot of the time, she's not necessarily in that zone with me where she's watching what I'm doing. So I have to really commit to myself that I'm not going to look, that I'm not going to check to make sure that they're still there on the sidewalk, or to make sure, is that police officer still behind me? And can I just let it be and not feel that anxiety?
And I will say this, you do it, you probably don't realize it, you do it even when you're a passenger. Because there's a lot of times when we're driving by somebody, or they're at the sidewalk, or if they're at a crosswalk or something, like, do you see that person?
Oh yeah.
You ask me if I've seen that person, when I have.
Sure.
Or did you see that person on the bike? You ask me that.
And I will say
frequently.
I will say I have had to fight the urge to not ask multiple times before. Because even when you've said, yes, I see them, if I don't think that you're doing exactly something that feels just right to me, then I'll have to, I think about it, and it gets in there and it loops. And then I may have to ask you again.
So, like, just even doing this episode, we're talking about this type of stuff, like, these are not normal conversations that Stacey and I have at home, or, on a day-to-day about driving and checking and that type of thing. So now, as we're driving around and she now is a passenger and asks me those questions, I know that it's probably coming from an OCD angle than just a, concerned passenger type of thing. And now I know in my back of my brain, I've got to lock that up and say, I'm not sure, or who are you talking about? To maybe bring your anxiety up.
Yeah.
To practice the ERP on those small things.
Sure.
And that's where, like, us doing this podcast, things like that come out that I would not have thought about.
Well, yeah. And I never even thought about the idea that I became so consumed, for example, with a police officer behind me, or with people walking on the sidewalk and checking. I never really even thought about that being OCD. I just knew I was uncomfortable in those situations, and then therefore I'm uncomfortable and don't feel safe driving, because what if I hit someone? What if I hit a person? What if I hit a car? What if it's always this uncertain discomfort. I can't sit in that. And so again, it just became an easy out to not drive anymore. And then I really missed
and to
out
be
on a lot of
honest,
things, and my independence got smaller. And
a lot smaller.
yeah,
And in the early days for us, we always, for me, it was like, oh, we're saving money. We don't
right.
now need to take care of 2 cars.
Mhm.
We don't need to pay for gas. We don't need to pay for car
Mhm.
insurance. There's a lot of,
Yeah,
I was looking at it from a benefit standpoint,
right.
but not really realizing why you didn't want to drive versus just, I don't like to drive.
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of people out there that just don't like driving.
Sure.
But you didn't want to drive because of a lot of different
Mhm.
reasons.
Mhm.
So we went down to 1 car
Mhm.
for a good 15
I was
years
going to say more than a decade.
until you were actually recently diagnosed, when you had to,
Mhm.
start actually driving and
Yep.
doing that part of your ERP. And then, now we finally have 2 vehicles. But
I know, and I love driving. Like,
yeah,
I still have to catch myself not. I have to be honest with myself. Don't check, or what's gonna. I guess I still have to keep myself accountable. But I love driving, and I'm very comfortable behind the wheel now. Where I never ever thought, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, if I would have been behind the wheel again, I would have said
no.
never.
If you would have asked me even 3 years ago,
Yeah.
would you drive on the freeway,
Mm-hmm.
long distance,
Yeah.
for a couple hours, I would say absolutely not.
But now I have.
Now you have,
Woohoo!
which is good.
It is good. And now I feel that independence coming back. I feel the confidence coming back with it. I feel that I'm now supporting my spouse with driving, because Mark had to take on so much of the responsibility of driving our children around, driving me around. And again, we've talked about this in previous episodes and how my lack of driving did affect
Well, and right now, because you are
our
driving,
marriage and our family.
yeah, right now, because you are driving, it's actually opened up more opportunities for our kids too. Like Avery
Yeah.
wanted to go to a different school that's not
Mm-hmm.
her home school, to
Yep.
where a bus would pick her up and bring her to school, type of thing, for high school.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't driving,
Mm-hmm. She wouldn't be able to go.
that would not be an option.
I know.
Now, if we found somebody that she could carpool with, that still would not have been an option, because your OCD would have not allowed that to happen.
Right.
So going through that ERP and everything, that has allowed her to be able to attend a different school.
Mm-hmm.
A, because you're driving, you can pick her up until she starts driving.
Mm-hmm.
We're a year away from that,
Yep.
which is scary.
Yes, it is.
So once that happens, then, until that happens, you got to pick her up. I can drop her off because it works with my schedule.
Right. No, it's again, it has opened up so much for me personally, for our family. And I never thought that I'd be able to do it. And yet here I am, and I'm doing it. And there's so much of that I see either on social media or listening to other podcasts, and I'll hear somebody say something or see it, and I'll think, oh my gosh, wow, I never thought about that. Even though I've been in this journey for the amount of time we've been in it, it is so fascinating how I'm still learning, even about myself. Like some of the physical symptomology of OCD, stomach issues, headaches, dizziness, chest pain. These are all things that I have learned could be as a result of your OCD, because the panic and the anxiety sets in. And some of those pieces I've been dealing with for years and years, and never attributed it to anything like OCD. But I can see now, for example, chest pain. I have that. And I do notice that it comes on when I start to panic or when I start to have anxiety. And I always just thought, as most people would, oh, it's a heart issue, it's a medical issue, oh my goodness, not thinking that it is actually my OCD that is causing some physical symptoms of something like chest pain because of the panic that's setting in, or that feeling of discomfort that's just so overwhelming, and it's coming out in that regard.
It's amazing what the brain can
And I
do to
would
your
have
body.
never attributed that to OCD. But now as I think about it, I do. I just think that there's so much more that we can learn and more opportunity to support one another in this community overall. And I know I've said that phrase a lot in this episode so far, but it really is so important that we keep talking about it, that we keep sharing
experiences,
our own journeys with it. We keep doing education around OCD, and we share that education with others, especially with those that don't have OCD. Exactly. Because there is this idea that, well, yes. And again, another concept that we've talked about in previous episodes, but why I have OCD. Oh yeah, I'm a little OCD as well. And then when they talk or give an example perhaps about what they think OCD is and what we really know what OCD is and how exhausting and how debilitating it can be, it's challenging. And so it's important for us to get that education out there. And a lot of how we do that is through talking about our own experiences.
And it's amazing how sometimes when you talk about having, like, I recognize this when you're talking to people and you're like, oh no, I have OCD. And they're like, oh, I do too. And because there's one little thing that they feel like they do that's OCD, but it's really not. It's just, personality traits sometimes.
Well,
but they kind of turn their ears off. They don't really want to listen to really what it is because they feel like they know it.
Right.
And those are the hard people to get through.
Right.
And to educate.
Yes.
And, there's sometimes you really have to share the story to where they're like, oh, okay, this is.
Exactly.
It's funny when I hear, like, when I share the story with people versus you sharing the story with people, it's amazing how people respond to me differently than you.
Ooh, interesting.
Because I'm not the sufferer and I'm not saying I have it. I say my wife has it.
Right.
And I can go into the educational piece versus you saying I have it and like, oh, I do too. They want to, I feel like they want to relate to you.
I get it. Yes. But trying to relate often then is very, what's the word I want to use?
Kind of off-putting.
It is off-putting, but it's very disrespectful. Let's just say it that way. And I don't mean that people are intentionally disrespecting me when they'll say, oh, I have a little OCD too, or, oh no, I have OCD too. It's just a matter of they don't really know. And that's why it's so misunderstood. And that's why it's so important that we come together, all of us, in any facet we can, to talk and to share and to educate. And I know, again, I keep repeating that too, but I cannot express how important that becomes in this side of mental health as it relates to obsessive compulsive disorder, which many people misunderstand. And then I think Mark's right. And I think you are right, babe, that I get that a lot where I'll say, oh, I was diagnosed with OCD. And then someone will say, oh, I have OCD too. And then immediately they are just explaining to me how they're OCD or what they think it is, or, oh, I need my folders all in the same order, or, oh, I need, all those paper clips put away in that same jar, or things like that. And it's so hard for me now to listen to that because my own self knows that I want to be kind to that person. And so I want to, oh, okay, well, and then I get very shy about telling about myself, and I've mentioned this in a previous episode as well, or they don't ask. They don't ask about me. They don't ask about what my symptomology is. They don't ask how long I've had it. They don't ask anything.
And it's hard to.
And so then I feel stuck.
To share that after they don't ask,
right. They just automatically assume, oh, I like all my pencils the same direction, so that must be what you're talking about too. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. And so I think people need to ask questions.
And if you are out there and you want to share your journey too, it's really important to get your voice out. And that's one thing I think you and I have really come to terms with, or realized that this has been very helpful to share our story, our journey with people and people you don't know. I mean, that's very vulnerable when you do that. Like,
yeah,
our podcast is circulating around the world,
and we have shared the deepest and darkest of where we were and where we are now, and we have really peeled back the layers of all of that rawness. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah,
it is now.
And I think that sharing your story can feel very
vulnerable. Yeah,
but when you do it, I think sometimes you feel a little bit of freedom.
It does feel freeing. It does feel like you're contributing to the healing of your own self and your family and friends and those who love you. Yeah.
And then other people are out there can relate.
Yes. And it makes what we're doing too the most authentic that we can be. We are offering our most authentic selves out there with this, and I'm just very...
And I'm grateful that we're doing this together.
Yeah, me too.
Every episode is us doing this together, and I'm grateful that you and I get to sit down, every week and talk about this. And when we first started this, I'm like, oh my goodness, how are we gonna continue this podcast? I can see this, us getting to like 2 or 3, 4 episodes, and we're gonna run out of stuff to talk about. And and there's some episodes I think we probably do ramble a little bit. Like right now, we're probably rambling a little bit, but every week we find something in our life that it's like, oh yeah, I do realize that.
Right.
Oh, this is something we should talk about. And, we pencil it down. And then when we sit down, these are just, this is the idea that I have for this week, and let's roll with it.
And we go with it. Yep.
And that's just kind of how we live our life.
Yeah. It's also how we maintain that authenticity too, is that we are still going through this day by day, week by week. I still have OCD today, just as I had it 2 years ago, just as I started having it when I was 15, and I'll have it again in another 10 years.
Yeah.
And things come up in our life and situations come up, and you're still helping me work through some exposures, and we're still coming up with exposures.
Yeah, like the driving thing. And you asking me if I see somebody.
Right.
Can't respond to that anymore because I just reassured your OCD.
Let's not get crazy. I think that...
And that's the hard part about the spouse thing is not picking up what could be OCD versus just regular conversation.
Right, which is also how we came up with our therapist in some ways. In other ways, it was kind of a bridge to help me lessen the urge to check in and to gain reassurance, is that we developed the passes, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So each week I would get X number of passes, and I would cash those in and say, okay, I need a pass.
See, I forgot about that.
Oh.
So let's explain that a little bit.
You?
So
okay.
When we first started the ERP with Stacee, we gave her a number of times that she could say, I need this. I'm using a pass. I'm using a card.
I used to get 3 a week, and then he took it down to 1 a week.
And now we're at 0 a week. And some maybe 1 a month type of thing you get.
Fine.
But it would be like, okay, I'm using a card on this one because I really need.
Because that anxiety was peaking so heavily that I knew it was the next step was the panic attack.
Yeah.
And again, we've talked about time and place for exposures, time and place for ERP, time and place for a panic attack to occur. And in the moments where it's not ideal, I would literally say to Marc, okay, I'm cashing in one of my passes. I need this reassurance.
But she only had 3. And if she got to the 3, there were no more for that week.
No, he was very stingy about that too, let me say.
But you made you also think about, is this something that I really need to
Yes.
actually use a pass on? Or, oh, by the way, I'm already past my anxiety.
100%.
And it made your brain switch to
100%. And and the other part of that, which is so good, is that I would have, and we talked about this, especially when we were in business ownership phase of our life, and I was calling you pretty incessantly throughout the day. And then as we started to go through therapy and I was applying some of the ERP, etc., I would start to say to myself, is this something I need to talk to Marc about right now? Is this something I need to ask Marc about? Is this something that Marc needs to know about right now? Like, I would think to myself, and I would say, no. So let's just sit in that discomfort, or let's let the panic flow, get that anxiety down on its own, and you're going to be okay.
And I will tell you this, for the person that does not have OCD and you're at work and you're not getting the phone calls, that was a very weird feeling. Like I think myself, my nervous system was anticipating you calling me. And I would, you had to call me 2 or 3 or 4, 10 times a day during my my work day. And I was anticipating that. And then all of a sudden you took that away, and I kind of went through a little withdrawal,
I agree with you, because you were so, in that time frame, especially when we were running the business and I was calling so much to check in with you, to get reassurance, you were constantly feeding into that, right? You were giving me that reassurance. And so we were just restarting that cycle of OCD, which we now know we have to interrupt in order to get better. But you were feeding that OCD
without even knowing it. Giving you that drug.
Yes. I was getting what I was needing so that anxiety would go away quicker. And it just made it like it would come back tenfold. And then tenfold again. And we didn't realize that what we were doing, or how you were operating in that moment, was not what I needed in order to get on the other side.
And now the phone calls are very different.
Yeah.
Like I can, when I answer the phone though, in your voice tone, I can usually tell when it's looking for a check-in versus a let's have a conversation.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
But like even today with Avery wanting to go to the store to get some hair dye and stuff, it was check-in-ish.
Not check-in-ish. No, I'm going to disagree with that one.
Well, it felt like check-in. Like, hey, is it okay if I tell her my back hurts and I don't want to go?
No. Hold on a second. Oh, see, this is where we get to the real meat of some things. No, I didn't feel like it was a check-in. I felt like it was a true moment of saying, hey, I'm down with my back. I can't necessarily drive her this time. I may need you to take her.
Yeah.
And for me, that was a win, because I thought, my gosh, I'm not checking in with him. It's that I could drive her, but right now, because my back's out a little bit, I can't necessarily do it. You don't want to.
Yeah.
And
for safety reasons, more than anything.
Yeah. Because I can't really move very well.
But then like, that's how I felt about it a little bit.
Oh,
and you didn't feel like it is and stuff. And so this is where you and I have these conversations about what was a check-in, what's not a check-in, why did I feel like it was a check-in, why
conversation for us now. Yes.
And that's the hard part in the phase that we're at with the ERP. Because we're at I kind of feel like the tail end of it being at the forefront of my mind all the time, and your mind all the time, and even our kids.
Yeah.
It's starting to dim a little bit. We still have to keep it there because we don't want to slip back.
Right.
But then that's where you and I are trying to figure out what are the real conversations versus
the check-ins.
check-ins or ERP
Mhm,
needing and so on and so forth.
And we're getting there.
Yeah,
And
we're
we
getting a lot
continue to
better.
get there. Yes.
So
Yes, we do.
I want to thank everybody for listening tonight.
Me too. 100%. And hey, everyone will be listening to this on July 16th. So we want to give a shout out to our sister-in-law, Sarah. Happiest birthday to you. And again, thank you for always listening and for living uncertain with us. And so proud to be part of this, this whole community of those of us with OCD and those who love someone with OCD. So until next time, everyone, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode and living uncertain with us. We are not therapists, and this podcast is intended to provide information and support. It should not replace traditional means of seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. If you like this episode or would like to hear more, please like, subscribe, or share with someone you think may benefit. Here at Living Uncertain, we're building a community of support. If you and your significant other would like to share your story, we would love to have you on the podcast. Please click on the link in the episode description and fill out the interest form.